Hi, so I'm Seth Caldwell. I've been working on all kinds of browser plugins and tools to kind of help humanity. Recently, building lots of different AI stuff. And one of the big problems I think with the phase of the internet that we're on is that we lack control as drivers of cultivation. So sometimes people think of, noise to signal and you have to curate your feeds. When you go to a particular Reddit feed, there's an algorithm that controls what it's showing you. When you go to Facebook, when you go to any of these social sites right now, they have their own algorithm that controls what you see, and they try to provide you stuff across different metrics depending upon which platform. Facebook used to just be engagement, and there was a problem with engagement because you get all these posts that are just rage baiting you to be angry. And yeah, you're engaged, but you're angry. Your mental wellness is not being prioritized by these algorithms. They're showing you stuff that's making you, uh, provably making you unhappy, depressed, and so on. We all kind of know this, and that's why we try to minimize our screen time and not get into loops of doom scrolling in the morning or before we go to bed and that sort of thing. Um, there's a game that I play called Path of Exile sometimes. This is the creator of the original Path of Exile 1, and he's working on his own stuff now. He's been publishing lots of these videos, so this is like really high on my list because he's talking about some AI and some games is an hour and a half long talk. And this is really highly relevant to me. When I just went to the Path of Exile thread, it was the first thing served to me, which is very good. The algorithms are, this is a video that I want to see, which is great. Um, but now the question is it being served to me because it has the most upvotes, the most comments, the most engagement? How does the algorithm know what I like, right? And we don't really know how these algorithms are built. It's not the companies that are building these algorithms are not always transparent. There are some companies that will show, here's an open source of our ranking algorithm that, has a personalized ranking of every piece of content based on this vector database, and like they might not even understand how the AI is correlating all these numbers to like give you a piece of content as the top piece of content. But it's usually related to these things. And so there's been many level ups in the last 10 20 years in terms of different metrics, different ways of causing weighting onto content other than just how many upvotes, how much engagement it's causing. The companies are trying to deliver you dopamine on some sort of simulated human dopamine delivery system that causes addiction, sometimes at times when they're really complex ones. um, and you don't really have control over this in any way, right? So what I'm proposing we need to have a solution for is to this exact problem, so that we can kind of have control over. I want to first see the ranking that this thing had versus something else. Obviously, here's a promoted thing, and this is being paid to be delivered to me. So at least they're disclosing the fact that this is in a different category, right? It's ranked only because a company paid to have it rank for me. And there's a lot of hidden data here as well, right? Maybe they targeted me specifically, like this specific user, I want to pay money to deliver him this ad because they know that I'm going to dev conferences recently, and they know that because of my engagement on other websites where they're tracking me, right? Maybe not this company directly, but Google is tracking me everywhere, right? Um, and so they're able to say, hey, target someone that's recently attended a hackathon with this ad. And they pay for that targeting. So just because I see promoted here, I don't know exactly how it was promoted, which I think there should be laws around that, perhaps where I can click this and I can see exactly what the promotion was. There are some sites that provide this as well, but there's no way to really do this here on Reddit. Um, so that's one thing to keep in mind, is just like having transparency on how these things are being weighted to be delivered to us, sponsored or otherwise. Um, we can scroll down here. I typically like comedy and memes, and so there's like the algorithm knows that this is a funny piece of content, so it's not going to give me funny content, funny content, funny content. It's going to try to spread those things around a bit in its ordering, so that I'm getting engaged on multiple different categories, uh, keeping my engagement maximally there, right? So we could probably talk all day about how to create the best engagement or keep user on the platform for the most time so that they make money off of ads like this, which is typically how these ranking systems are built. But I want to talk about something else here, which is this number 264. What does it represent? Um, so on Reddit, there's upvotes and downvotes. And so this is representing a diff between the upvotes and the downvotes. And sometimes it's negative and sometimes it's positive. But I don't know how many total votes there were. I don't know who made these votes. I don't know anything about those people who made the votes. Um, those are three different things. Sometimes it sounds like those last two are the same, but really, like, knowing a particular username who made a vote is one thing, but knowing how that user scores on certain metrics is another thing. For example, is that person likely to be a bot, right? Is this artificially inflated by bots? And the sites try to detect such things on their own end, but they often don't provide that weight, that measurement as a weighting on top of this vote. So like if someone's like acting like a bot but hasn't yet been banned, then their vote is equally valid in this upvote as someone who is very much, you know, guaranteed not to be a bot. And I think this is a problem that should have been solved like 20 years ago. I've been working on social media sites for almost my whole life, since I was about 12 years old when I started writing bulletin board systems, and I had users calling my house to connect to my computer to chat with each other and play online games together and stuff. And I started building like the first Facebook, and I had problems with, you know, the company that owned the photos of the users contacting me with take it down notices because the users hadn't bought the rights to their yearbook photos at our high school and things like this. And so I quickly encountered problems with people bullying each other online, creating these kind of rage bait posts, trying to do content moderation, trying not to let bots game the system. These are things I've thought about for most of my life. And so a solution that I've come up with now is I've bought this domain and I want to create this site called wayvote.org. There's nothing here yet. But the concept for wayvote is like being able to weight your votes. So like someone who is possibly a bot, their vote is maybe less likely to influence this number than someone who is definitely not a bot. But not having the company do that weighting, having the users, the end users control that. So like some end users might be okay with the fact that some people might be bots, and they can set the threshold for where their tolerance is on that. And they can see the weightings of all of these different measurements of maybe a bot, maybe not a bot. Um, all these different classifications of users that the companies are doing in the background that they're not disclosing. Facebook does disclose some of this. Facebook discloses measurements on political party, etc. Here we go. So there's studies that, you know, people have done stuff on, and then they, like Facebook was forced to show like, hey, they have a model that knows whether you're a Republican or Democrat, even though you haven't ticked it on a questionnaire anywhere, right? They see how you're engaging with different content, and they make predictions on you, and then they classify you as one or the other. So if someone wanted to make an ad to target conservatives, they could do that, and they could pay to make sure their ad is only served to people that their algorithm has ranked as a conservative. So this is mostly like really big money for companies like Facebook that are trying to control, trying to provide this power to advertisers. But the end user would love to have control over this. They might not want to let ads target them based on their political affiliation. Um, at least we're, you know, being told that it is a promoted piece of content and not, you know, an authentic piece of content. But sometimes even these authentic contents can basically game the system and promote to particular people. Um, and there's complex tools to help you do that so that you can essentially promote yourself to the people, the audience that you want to promote it to without them realizing that you're doing that. Instagram does this all the time. So you can like actually give a video to people who aren't yet following you. You could pay for this. And you know, when you're scrolling through Instagram, you're seeing some of these things. You don't realize that you've been targeted simply because you're not yet following them, um, or because you've, you know, seen a previous video for a certain duration, but not yet followed them. So it's like I want to target people who have seen my content before, but not yet followed me, so that I can maybe hook them into following me now. This is kind of hot right now in terms of like the online marketing um, for influencers. And it's a little bit deceptive because they're using algorithms to control what we're seeing. They're curating and our feed for us. But there's a difference between curation and cultivation. So cultivation, um, typically, you're combining two things together. So cultivated often means refined and well-educated or something like this, but it also means to prepare or grow living cells and tissues, or there's something where you're combining two things together to create something new. You're creating a new crop that hadn't yet existed before by cultivating this crop, and then now you've got a whole new crop that might, lemons are like the specific kind. Bananas are a really good study on this. You can look into the history of cultivating bananas and how we have a less delicious banana now because it was more profitable for the companies to create that kind of banana than another kind. Um, and if the users were given power to cultivate and curate their feeds themselves, um, they would be much happier users probably. And we would be able to do such things as like give an internationally recognized standard intelligence test, for example, and say, I want to see how this ranks if I have, a multiplier of 10 for every standard deviation above or below in the intelligence test. So meaning if I try to vote for something and I'm one standard deviation below the average intelligence, my vote is worth maybe 10% less, or worth 1/10 rather, than someone who's average. And someone who's intelligent is above, on that test, their vote's weight is worth 10. So every time they vote on something, they're actually adding 10 to this number. And so I can see, do smart people like engaging with this? So if I score high on this intelligence test, I can create an echo chamber where I'm only interacting with people who are smart on the internet. Now, creating these echo chambers could potentially be a bad thing, but we're already being stuck in these echo chambers in ways that are very disempowering to us. We don't have control over them. The companies can have foreign governments paying to put us in particular echo chambers without our realization that it's happening. Most of the family members I have that are Republican, their feeds look very, very different than my feed. I'm a little bit in the middle, more of a centrist, but I lean liberal on most issues. And so my feed is very, very different. I like, channels that present both sides of an argument rather than a channel that promotes just one side of the argument. Whereas theirs pretty much is always promoting the Republican side in various ways. And so it would be nice to be able to, enter and exit these echo chambers at will rather than being stuck in them. So I can say, let's see how this votes on this metric. I could create maybe multiple different templates of, okay, smart people, and then I can really quickly toggle it with a browser plugin. Okay, Republicans. Okay, people who are game developers, people who have passed a basic programming test, people who have passed a basic artificial intelligence design test, something like this, right? Where I can engage with content and see the people that have upvoted highly, like the stuff in AI news, for example. There's so much AI news every single day, but the people that are the most intelligent and understand AI the best, I want to see how they voted on things. And the algorithm kind of does this behind the scenes by keeping track of who's like, being followed the most, who's being reposted the most, and then giving their votes like kind of waiting behind the scenes. So you might see a piece of content that's, got less upvotes than the next one below it, but because they had like these pillars of the community that have upvoted it, it ends up getting served higher than the other thing because it has a hidden ranking. Basically, I don't want things to have a hidden ranking. I want to understand why they ranked the way they did. And I think that we can do this with a browser plugin that allows people to complete like, these self-reported surveys are not the best. Like, are you Republican or Democrat is not really the best. Like, just ask them more direct questions. Like, do you support abortion or not? Or do you support, choice? Uh, or are you pro-life? And then like these kinds of questions that you can maybe weigh things on, um, or have them take, a test online. And sometimes people will game these tests, but for the most part, I think just giving them these kind of like critical thinking tests, reading comprehension tests. So many times in my history, I've been in a debate with someone where I want them to know that their critical reading ability is 2 standard deviations lower than the average, and that mine is 2 above. And so if we're interpreting a piece of content differently, that those test scores should be relevant to determining who might be wrong, because we both might be humble people and want to just explore and have a healthy debate. But I would like to know when I am below the standard deviation across a particular metric and someone else is higher. Maybe I'm discussing biology, which I'm not as familiar with. I mean, I took chemistry in college a little bit, and I never really took much bio. I took a little bit of thermo, but there's someone else who is a professional. I would like to read their content carefully if I knew that that metric was part of their posting. And there's nothing like this across Twitter, across everything. The lowest common denominator is ruling the internet right now, and it's terrible. It's causing humanity a lot of slowdown, and it's causing our debates to be very unhealthy and oftentimes very hostile. And I think that if we had some kind of tool to give us the power of cultivating our online spaces, we'll create a lot more beautiful fruit on the internet. That's about it.